threats filling up semi trucks. Tell me who I am. This fucking hell. I just got here 5 minutes ago and I touched up my makeup and I was supposed to make guac before I got here, but I didn't have time. So y'all are sorry, I got a call. Some fucking spam caller. Anyway, we're gonna make guac real quick because I was craving it and I didn't have enough time to eat it before I came. So I'm gonna show you guys how to make my guac real quick. I'm not even gonna be able to fucking eat it because I'm literally gonna be reading, but let's see if this avocado feels a little squishy. Oh, it's pretty. I'm gonna squeeze this hoe out. Hold on. That's disgusting. God, I love avocado, but like getting it out is so messy. And I don't even have a bag in here. This is just a mess. I have a napkin. Now I gotta. The day I had today, y'all, I need alcohol in my system. Today was horrible. I'm debating if I should do a live tomorrow because I'm exhausted. Mentally, physically, emotionally. I'm just tired. It's a lot. And it's gonna be worse tomorrow because not even all of my kids are here. They threw 2 kids on me after I came back from vacation, and I had 11, so now I'm up to 13 kids. Also, we're cutting this lime and I have to rip it because I didn't cut it all the way through. We're cutting this lime, this limon, and I have my guac, or not my guac, my avocado. So we're just putting my avocado in here. And now I'm just gonna squeeze the lime in there. It's literally a cooking with beef today. I like my avocado, or like I like my guac to be really sour, so I put a lot of lime in there. Now we're just gonna mix it up. But yeah, they threw 2 kids on me, so now I have 13, y'all. 13 2-year-olds. One of them is 3. 12 2-year-olds, 1 3-year-old. And so you can imagine how that is. And then I have a new little boy and he just needs a lot of attention. Like, he needs a whole teacher to himself. And I have help in there. Now I'm going to put salt in there. I have help. My teaching assistant, she's like really helpful, but it's still just our room is not that big. So it's like a lot. It's a lot. So we're just gonna mix this up right now. Sorry. And then I'm going to add my special, let me taste it first actually. Anyway, so it's just been a lot. And I was really craving guac. And I took some to eat for my lunch, but I forgot to bring a knife to my car because I ate my lunch in my car because I don't like eating lunch in the building. I like to be separated from the building whenever I'm on my break because I don't like to hear the kids. Anyway, so I forgot a knife and I couldn't cut my avocado, so. That's good. Anyway, I also didn't have this. This is some salsa. I don't know if y'all can get this salsa anywhere else, but there's something in there. I don't know if y'all can get this salsa anywhere else. I know you can make it. I don't know the ingredients to this. Anyway, sorry. This spoon is dirty. Whatever, it's fine. It's just avocado. I just take like a literal pinch and I put it in there. I don't know what the ingredients to this salsa is. I just know that it's fucking delicious in my avocado. And I like the little spice that it adds to it. So that's why I put it in there. Sorry. Anyway, let's taste it. God, I love guac so much. Oh my God. Have y'all listened to Sabrina Carpenter's album? The salsa has a name. I don't know the name of it. I think it might be made with cashews. or something. But I don't know. I listened to the new Sabrina Carpenter album. That shit is so good. There's one song in particular that has a death grip on me. Like, I'm in a chokehold. I can't listen to anything else but that song. It is, what the fuck is it called? I Can't Read Your Mind, or Can't Read Your Mind. That song has me in a chokehold. Why do I look so, I look dark, I feel like. That song has me in a literal chokehold. Sorry, y'all, I had to eat something really quick because I'm, oh god. Let me, anyway, sorry. Okay, last bite. And just like that, a whole fucking avocado is gone. God. Sarah gifted me an avocado. Salsa poblana? Maybe. I honestly don't know what it's made out of. And I need to ask my dad because, I mean, we eat this shit up at the house. We eat it up. We're regulars at that place. Because none of us at my house know how to make it. But anyway. Okay. I feel so much better. Food is really, 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 really my fucking therapy sometimes. I love food so much. Okay. I feel so much better. Alright, I'm ready to read to y'all now. Thank you for waiting. We're reading chapter 7 or 5 through 7 today, so buckle up. In my house we just eat avocados like they're a lifeline, literally. Avocados are just, you can never go wrong with avocados. I love avocados. God, I love them. They're so good. Okay, chapter, I'm gonna scoop my chair back a little bit. No, I'm not, that was a mistake. Chapter 5. The night might very well end in her blood being shed, Aylin realized as she hurtled down the crooked streets of the slums, sheathing her bloodied fighting knives to keep from dripping a trail behind her. Thanks to months of running through the Cambrian mountains with Rowan, her breathing remained steady, her head clear. She supposed that after facing they almost made me say it. After facing walkers, after escaping ancient creatures the size of small cottages, and after incinerating 4 demon princes, 20 men in pursuit wasn't all that horrific. But still, a giant, raging pain in her ass, and one that would not likely end pleasantly for her. No sign of Cale, no whisper of his name on the lips of the men who had surged into the vaults. She hadn't recognized any of them, but she'd felt the offness that marked most of those who had been in contact with Wordstone, or been corrupted by it. They wore no collars or rings, but something inside these men had rotted nonetheless. At least Arabin hadn't betrayed her, though how convenient that he'd left only minutes before the king's new guards had finally found the winding trail she'd left from the dogs. Or winding, sorry. Perhaps it was a test to see whether her abilities remained up to Arabin's standards, should she accept their little bargain. As she'd hacked her way through body after body, she wondered if he'd even realized that this entire evening had been a test for him as well, and that she'd brought those men right to the vaults. She wondered how furious he would be when he discovered what was left of the pleasure hall that had brought him so much money. It had also filled the coffers of the people who had slaughtered Sam, and who had enjoyed every moment of it. What a shame that the current owner of the vaults, a former underling of Rorik Farron and a dealer of flesh and opiates, had accidentally run into her knives, repeatedly. She'd left the vaults in bloody splinters, which she supposed was merciful. If she'd had her magic, she probably would have burned it to ash, but she didn't have magic, and her mortal body, despite months of her hard training, was starting to feel heavy and cumbersome as she continued her sprint down the alley. The broad street at its other end was too bright, too open. She veered toward a stack of broken crates and rubbish heaped against the wall of a brick building, high enough that if she timed it right, she could jump from the windowsill a few feet above. Behind her, closer now, rushing footsteps and shouts sounded. They had to be fast as hell to have kept up with her all this way. Well, damn. She leaped onto the crates, the pile shaking and swaying as she scaled it, each movement concise, swift, balanced. One wrong step and she would go shooting through the rotten wood, or topple the whole thing to the ground. The crates groaned, but she kept moving up and up and up until she reached the pinnacle and jumped to the overhanging windowsill. Her fingers barked in pain, digging into the brick so hard that her nails broke inside her gloves. She gritted her teeth and pulled, hauling herself onto the ledge and then through the open window. She allowed herself 2 heartbeats to take in the cramped kitchen, dark and clean. I can't see shit. Okay, I have to keep checking to make sure it's not buffering, and I can't see nothing. Dark and clean, a candle burning from the narrow hall beyond. Palming her knives, the shouting coming closer from the alley below, she raced for the hall. Someone's home. This was someone's home, and she was leading those men through it. She charged down the hall, the wooden floors shuddering under her boots, scanning. There were 2 bedrooms, both occupied. Shit. 3 adults were sprawled on dirty mattresses in the first room, and 2 more adults slept in the other bedroom, one of them shooting upright as she thundered past. "Stay down," she hissed, the only warning she could give before reaching the remaining door in the hall, barricaded with a chair wedged beneath the knob. It was about as much protection as they could find in the slums. She hurled the chair aside, sending it clattering against the wall of the narrow hallway, where it would slow her pursuers for a few seconds at least. She yanked the apartment door open, the feeble lock splintering with a snap. Half a movement had her hurling a silver coin behind her to pay for the damage, and a better lock. A communal stairwell lay beyond, the wooden steps stained and rotted, completely dark. Male voices echoed too close behind, and banging began at the bottom of the stairwell. Aylin raced for the ascending stairs, around and around, her breath now shards of glass in her lungs until she passed the 3rd level, until the stairs narrowed, and Aylin didn't bother being as quiet as she slammed into the roof door. The men already knew where she was. Balmy night air smothered her, and she gulped it down as she scanned the roof and the streets below. The alley behind was too wide. The broad street to her left wasn't an option, but there, down the alley, the sewer grate. Perhaps pay a visit to the southeastern section of the tunnels tonight. You might find the person you're looking for. She knew who he meant. Another little present of his, then. A piece in their game. With feline ease, she shimmied down the drain pipe anchored to the side of the building. Far above, the shouts grew. They'd reached the roof, the reek already rising up to meet her. Are we back? I think we're back. Okay. Good to go. Alright. Let's see. Aylin loathed the sewers. I don't know if y'all heard me, but I said that I think she's gonna talk about the time when she almost fucking drowned and Sam saved her. I already know it's coming. Not because they were filthy, reeking, and full of vermin. They were actually a convenient way to get around Rifthold unseen and undisturbed if you knew the way. She'd hated them ever since she'd been bound up and left to die, courtesy of a bodyguard who hadn't taken so well to her plans to kill his master. I told y'all. The sewers had flooded, and after freeing herself from her bond, she had actually swum through the festering water. But the exit had been sealed. Sam, by pure luck, had saved her, but not before she'd nearly drowned, swallowing half the sewer along the way. Oh, that's disgusting. It had taken her days and countless baths to feel clean, and endless vomiting. So climbing into that sewer and sealing the grate above her, for the first time that night her hands shook, but she forced herself past the echo of fear and began creeping through the dim, moonlit tunnels, listening. Heading southeast, she took a large, ancient tunnel, one of the main arteries of the system. It had probably been here from the moment Gavin Havillard decided to establish his capital along the Avery. She paused every so often to listen, but there were no signs of her pursuers behind her. An intersection of 4 different tunnels loomed ahead, and she slowed her steps, palming her fighting knives. The first 2 were clear. The third, the one that would take... Hold on. There. It's fucking hot in here. The first 2 were clear. The third, the one that would take her right into the path of the captain if he was headed to the castle, darker but wide. And the fourth, southeast. She didn't need her Fey senses to know that the darkness leaking from the southeastern tunnel wasn't of the usual sort. The moonlight from the grates above didn't pierce it. No noise issued, not even the scampering of rats. Another trick of Erebin's, or a gift. The faint sounds she'd been following had come from this direction, but any trail died here. She paced with feline quiet in front of the line where the murky light faded into impenetrable blackness. Silently, she plucked up a bit of fallen stone and chucked it into the gloom ahead. There was no answering sound when it should have landed. When it should have landed, yeah. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Aelin turned toward the cool female voice, casually angling her knives. The hooded guard from the vaults was leaning against the tunnel wall, not 20 paces behind her. Well, at least one of them was here. As for Kale, Aelin held up a knife as she stalked toward the guard, gobbling down every detail. Sneaking up on strangers in the sewers is also something I'd advise against. When Aelin got within a few feet, the woman lifted her hands, delicate but scarred, her skin tan even in the pale glow from the streetlights in the avenue above. If she'd managed to sneak up this close, she had to be trained, in combat or stealth or both. Of course, she was skilled, if Kale had her watching his back at the vaults, but where had he gone now? Disreputable pleasure halls and sewers, Aelin said, keeping her knives out. You certainly live the good life, don't you? The young woman pushed off the wall, her curtain of inky hair swaying in the shadows of her hood. Not all of us are blessed enough to be on the king's payroll, champion. She recognized her then. The real question was whether she'd told Kale, and where he was now. Dare I ask why I shouldn't throw stones down that tunnel? The guard pointed toward the tunnel closest behind her. Bright, open air. Come with me. Aelin chuckled. You'll have to do better than that. The slender woman stepped nearer, the moonlight illuminating her hooded face. Pretty, if grave, and perhaps 2 or 3 years older. The stranger said a bit flatly, You've got 20 guards on your ass, and they're cunning enough to start looking down here very soon. I'd suggest you come along. Aelin was half tempted to suggest she go to hell, but smiled instead. How'd you find me? She didn't care. She just needed to feel her out a bit more. Luck. I'm on scouting duty and popped onto the street to discover that you'd made new friends. Usually we have a strike first, ask questions later policy about people wandering the sewers. And who is this we? Aelin said sweetly. The woman just began walking down the bright tunnel, completely unconcerned with the knives Aelin still held. Arrogant and stupid, then. You can come with me, champion, and learn some things you probably want to know, or you can stay here and wait to see what answers that rock you threw. Aelin weighed the words, and what she'd heard and seen so far that night. Despite the shiver down her spine, she fell into step beside the guard, sheathing her knives at her thighs. With each block they trudged through the sewer muck. Aelin used the quiet to gather her strength. The woman strode swiftly but smoothly down the tunnel, and then another. Aelin marked each turn, each unique feature, each grate, forming a mental map as they moved. How did you recognize me? Aelin said at last. I've seen you around the city, months ago. The red hair was why I didn't immediately identify you at the vaults. Aelin watched her from the corner of her eye. The stranger might not know who Kale really was. He could have used a different name, despite what the woman claimed to know about whatever it was she thought Aelin was seeking. The woman said that in that cool, calm voice, Are the guards chasing you because they recognized you, or because you picked the fight you were so desperate to have at the vaults? Point for the stranger. Why don't you tell me? Do the guards work for Captain Westfall? The woman laughed under her breath. No, those guards don't answer to him. Aelin bit back her sigh of relief, even as 1,000 more questions rattled in her skull. Her boots squished something too soft for comfort, and she suppressed a shudder as the woman stopped before the entrance to another long tunnel, the first half illuminated by moonlight streaming in through the scattered grates. A natural darkness drifted out from the far end. A predatory stillness crept over Aelin as she peered into the gloom. Silence. Utter silence. Here, the stranger said, approaching an elevated stone walkway built into the side of the tunnel. Fool. Fool for exposing her back like that. She didn't even see Aelin slide free a knife. They'd gone far enough. The woman stepped onto the small, slick staircase leading to the walkway, her movements long-limbed and graceful. Aelin calculated the distance to the nearest exits, the depth of the little stream of filth running through the tunnel center, deep enough to dump a body if need be. Aelin angled her knife and slipped up behind the woman, as close as a lover, and pressed the blade against her throat. Can she chill out for like 2 seconds? Can she chill the fuck out for 2 seconds? Are we buffering? I can't see shit, y'all. It's bright as hell in here. I hope we're not buffering. I don't think we are. Okay, we're not. Okay, thank you, Sarah. Chapter 6. You get one sentence. Aelin breathed in the woman's ear as she pressed the dagger harder against her neck. One sentence to convince me not to spill your throat on the ground. The woman stepped off the stairs and, to her credit, wasn't stupid enough to go for the concealed weapons at her side. With her back against Aelin's chest, her weapons were beyond reach anyway. She swallowed, her throat bobbing against the dagger Aelin held along her smooth skin. I'm taking you to the captain. Aelin dug the knife in a bit more. Not all that compelling to someone with a blade at your throat. 3 weeks ago, he abandoned his position at the castle and fled. To join our cause. The rebel cause. Aelin's knees threatened to buckle. She supposed she should have included 3 parties in her plans. The king, Erebin, and the rebels, who might very well have a score to settle with her after she'd gutted Archer Finn last winter, even if Kale was working with them. Okay. She shut the thought down before its full impact hit her. And the prince? Alive, but still at the castle, the rebel hissed. Is that enough for you to put the knife down? Yes. No. If Kale was now working with the rebels... Aelin lowered her knife and stepped back into a pool of moonlight trickling in from an overhead grate. The rebel whirled and reached for one of her knives. Aelin clicked her tongue. The woman's fingers paused on the well-polished hilt. I decide to spare you, and that's how you repay me, Aelin said, tucking back her hood. I don't particularly know why I'm surprised. The rebel let go of her knife and pulled off her own hood, revealing her pretty, tan face, solemn and wholly unafraid, her dark eyes fixed on Aelin, scanning. Ally or enemy? Tell me why you came here, the rebel said quietly. The captain says you're on her side, yet you hid from him at the vaults tonight. Aelin crossed her arms and leaned against the damp stone wall behind her. Let's start with you telling me your name. My name is not your concern. Aelin lifted a brow. You demand answers, but refuse to give me any in return. No wonder the captain had you sit out that meeting. Hard to play the game when you don't know the rules. I heard what happened this winter. That you went to the warehouse and killed so many of us. You slaughtered rebels, my friends. That cool, calm mask didn't so much as flinch. And yet now I'm supposed to believe you were on our side all along. Forgive me if I'm not forthright with you. Should I not kill the people who kidnap and beat my friends? Aelin said softly. Am I not supposed to react with violence when I receive notes threatening to kill my friends? Am I not supposed to gut the self-serving prick who had my beloved friend assassinated? She pushed off the wall, stalking toward the woman. Would you like me to apologize? Should I grovel on my knees for any of that? The rebel's face showed nothing, either from training or genuine iciness. Aelin snorted. I thought so. So why don't you take me to the captain and save the self-righteous bullshit for later? The woman glanced toward the darkness again and shook her head slightly. If you hadn't put a blade to my throat, I would have told you that we'd arrived. She pointed to the tunnel ahead. You're welcome. Aelin debated slamming the woman into the filthy, wet wall just to remind her who exactly the king's champion was. But then ragged breathing scraped past her ears, coming from that darkness. Human breathing, and whispers. Boots sliding and thumping against stone. More whispers. Hushed demands from voices she didn't recognize to hurry and quiet now, and Aelin's muscles locked up as one male voice hissed, We've got 20 minutes until that ship leaves. Move. She knew that voice. but she still couldn't brace herself for the full impact of Cale Westfall, staggering out of the darkness at the end of the tunnel, holding a limp, too thin man between himself and a companion, another armed man guarding their backs. Even from the distance, the captain's eyes locked onto Aylin's. He didn't smile. He's not gonna be happy that she's back. He's not fucking happy that she's back. Chapter 7. This is our last chapter! God damn! There were 2 injured people in total. One held between Cale and his companion, the other sagging between 2 men she didn't recognize. 3 others, 2 men and another woman, guarded the rear. The rebel they dismissed with a glance, a friend. Aylin held each of their gazes as they hurried toward her, their weapons out. Blood was splattered on them all, red blood and black blood that she knew too well, and the 2 nearly unconscious people. She also knew that emaciated, dried-out look, the hollowness on their faces. She'd been too late with the ones in Wendelin, but somehow Cale and his allies had gotten these 2 out. Her stomach flipped. Scouting. The young woman beside her had been scouting the path ahead to make sure it was safe for this rescue. The guards in the city weren't corrupted just by ordinary Valg, as Erben had suggested. No, there was at least one Valg prince here, in these tunnels, if the darkness was any indicator. Shit. And Cale paused long enough for a companion to step in to help carry the injured man away. Then he was striding again, 20 feet away now, 15, 10. Blood leaked from the corner of his mouth, and his bottom lip was split open. They'd fought their way out. Explain, she breathed to the woman at her side. It's not my place, was the woman's response. She didn't bother to push it, not with Cale now in front of her, his bronze eyes wide as he took in the blood on Aylin herself. Are you hurt? His voice was hoarse. Aylin silently shook her head. God. Oh, stop. Anyway, without that hood, now that she could see his features, he was exactly as she remembered. That ruggedly handsome, tan face, perhaps a bit more gaunt and stubbly, but still Cale. Still the man she'd come to love before everything had changed. There were so many things she had thought she'd say or do or feel. The slender white scar slashed down his cheek. She'd given him that. The night Nehemiah had died, she'd given him that and tried to kill him. Would have killed him if Dorian hadn't stopped her. Even then, she'd understood that what Cale had done, whom he had chosen, had forever cleaved what was between them. It was the one thing she could not forget, could not forgive. Her silent answer seemed enough for the captain. He looked to the woman beside Aylin, to his scout, who reported to him, as though he were leading them all. The path ahead is clear. Stick to the eastern tunnels, she said. Cale nodded. Keep moving, he said to the others, who had now reached his side. I'll catch up in a moment. No hesitation, and no softness either, as if he'd done this 100 times. They wordlessly continued on through the tunnels, casting glances Aylin's way as they swept past. Only the young woman lingered, watching. Nesrin, Cale said, the name an order in itself. Nesrin stared at Aylin, analyzing, calculating. Aylin gave her a lazy grin. Philique, Cale growled, and the woman slid her midnight eyes toward him. If Nesrin's family didn't give away her heritage, it was those eyes, slightly up-tilted at the corners and lightly lined with kohl, that revealed at least one of her parents was from the southern continent. Interesting that the woman didn't try to hide it, that she chose to wear the kohl even while on a mission, despite Rifthold's less than pleasant policies toward immigrants. Cale jerked his chin toward their vanishing companions. Get to the docks. It's safer to have one of us remain here. Again, that cool voice, steady. Help them get to the docks, then get the hell back to the Craftsman District. Your garrison commander will notice if you're late. Nesrin looked Aylin up and down, those grave features never shifting. How do we know she didn't come here on his orders? Aylin knew very well who she meant. She winked at the young woman. If I'd come here on the king's orders, Nesrin Philique, you'd have been dead minutes ago. No flicker of amusement, no hint of fear. The woman didn't give Rowan a run for his money for sheer iciness. could give Rowan a run for his money. Sunset tomorrow, Cale said sharply to Nesrin. The young woman stared him down, her shoulders tight, before she headed into the tunnel. She moved like water, Aelin thought. Go, Aelin said to Cale, her voice a thin rasp. You should go. Help them, or whatever he was doing. Cale's bloodied mouth formed a thin line. I will, in a moment. No invitation for her to join. Maybe she should have offered. You came back, he said. His hair was longer, shaggier than it had been months ago. Adian. It's a trap. I know about Adian. God, what could she even say? Cale nodded distantly, blinking. You look different. She fingered her red hair. Obviously. No, he said, taking one step closer, but only one. Your face. The way you stand, you... He shook his head, glancing toward the darkness they just fled. Walk with me. She did. Well, it was more like walking as fast as they could without running. Ahead, she could just make out the sounds of his companions hurrying through the tunnels. All the words she'd wanted to say rushed around in her head, fighting to get out, but she pushed back against them for a moment longer. I love you. That's what he'd said to her the day she left. She hadn't given him an answer other than I'm sorry. A rescue mission? She said, glancing behind them. No whisper of pursuit. Cale grunted in confirmation. Former magic wielders are being hunted and executed again. The king's new guards bring them into the tunnels to hold until it's time for the butchering block. They like the darkness, seem to thrive on it. Why not the prisons? They were plenty dark enough, even for the Valg. Too public, at least for what they do to them before they're executed. A chill snaked down her spine. Do they wear black rings? A nod. Her heart nearly stopped. I don't care how many people they take into the tunnels. Don't go in again. Cale gave a short laugh. Not an option. We go in because we're the only ones who can. The sewers began to reek of brine. They had to be nearing the Avery, if she'd correctly counted the turns. Explain. They don't notice or really care about the presence of ordinary humans. Only people with magic in their bloodline. Even dormant carriers. He glanced sidelong at her. It's why I sent Ren to the north, to get out of the city. She almost tripped on a loose stone. Ren... Owlsbrook? Cale nodded slowly. The ground rocked beneath her. Ren Owlsbrook, another child of Terrasen, still alive. Alive. Ren's the reason we learned about it in the first place, Cale said. We went into one of their nests. They looked right at him, ignored Nesrin and me entirely. We barely got out. I sent him to Terrasen to rally the rebels there, the day after. He wasn't too happy about it, believe me. Interesting. Interesting and utterly insane. Those things are demons. The Valg, and they drain the life out of you, feed on you until they make a show of executing you. It's not a joke, she snapped. Her dreams were haunted by the roaming hands of those Valg princes as they fed on her, and every time she would awaken with a scream on her lips, reaching for a Fey warrior who wasn't there to remind her that they'd made it, they'd survived. I know it's not, Cale said. His eyes flicked to where Goldrin peeked over her shoulder. New sword? She nodded. There were perhaps only 3 feet between them now. 3 feet and months of missing and hating him. Months of crawling out of that abyss he'd shoved her into. But now that she was here, everything was an effort not to say she was sorry. Sorry for what she'd done to his face, but for the fact that her heart was healed. Still fractured in spots, but healed, and he was not in it. Not as he'd once been. You figured out who I am, she said, mindful of how far ahead his companions were. The day you left. She monitored the darkness behind them for a moment. All clear. He didn't move closer. Didn't seem all too inclined to hold her, or kiss her, or even touch her. Ahead, the rebels veered into a smaller tunnel. One she knew led directly toward the ramshackle docks and slums. I grabbed Fleetfoot, he said after a moment of silence. She tried not to exhale too loudly. Where is she? Safe. Nesrin's father owns a few popular bakeries in Rifthold, and he's done well enough that he's got a country house in the foothills outside the city. He said his staff there would care for her in secret. She seemed more than happy to torture the sheep, so I'm sorry I couldn't keep her here, but with the barking, I understand, she breathed. Thank you. She cocked her head. A land-owning man's daughter is a rebel? Nesrin is in the city guard, despite her father's wishes. I've known her for years. That didn't answer her question. She can be trusted? As you said, we'd all be dead already if she was here on the king's orders. Right. She swallowed hard, sheathing her knives and tugging off her gloves, if only because it gave her something to do with her hands. But then Cale looked to the empty finger where her amethyst... where his amethyst ring had once been. The skin was soaked with the blood that had seeped in through the fabric, some red, some black and reeking. Cale gazed at the empty spot, and when his eyes rose to hers again, it became hard to breathe. He stopped at the entrance to the narrow tunnel. Far enough, she'd realized. He'd taken her as far as he was willing to allow her to follow. I have a lot to tell you, she said before he could speak, but I think I'd rather hear your story first. How you got here, what happened to Dorian and Adian, all of it. Why were you meeting with Arabin tonight? That tentative tenderness in his face hardened into a cold, grim resolve, and her heart cracked a bit at the sight of it. Whatever he had to say wasn't going to be pleasant, but he just said, "Meet me in 40 minutes, and named an address in the slums. I have to deal with this first." He didn't wait for a response before jogging down the tunnel after his companions. Aelin followed anyway. Aelin watched from a rooftop, monitoring the docks of the slums as Cale and his companions approached the small boat. The crew didn't dare lay anchor, only tying the boat to the rotted posts long enough for the rebels to pass the sagging victims into the arms of the waiting sailors. Then they were rowing hard, out into the dark curve of the Avery, and hopefully to a larger ship in a month. At its mouth, sorry, not in a month. She observed Cale speak quickly to the rebels, Nesrin lingering when he'd finished. A short, clipped fight about something she couldn't hear, and then the captain was walking alone. Nesrin and the others headed off in the opposite direction without so much as a backward glance. Sorry. Cale made it a block before Aelin silently dropped down beside him. He didn't flinch. I should have known better. You really should have. Cale's jaw tightened, but he kept walking farther into the slums. Aelin examined the night dark, sleeping streets. A few feral urchins darted past, and she eyed them from beneath her hood, wondering which were on Arabin's payroll and might report to him that she'd been spotted blocks away from her old home. There was no point in trying to hide her movements. She hadn't wanted to anyway. The houses were ramshackle, but not wrecked. Whatever working-class families dwelled within tried their best to keep them in... tried their best to keep them in shape. Given their proximity to the river, they were likely occupied by fishermen, dock workers, and maybe the occasional slave on loan from his or her master. But no sign of trouble. No vagrants or pimps or would-be thieves lurking about. Almost charming for the slums. The story isn't a pleasant one, the captain began at last. Aelin let Cale talk as they strode through the slums, and it broke her heart. She kept her mouth shut as he told her how he'd met Adian and worked with him, and then how the king had captured Adian and interrogated Dorian. God! It took considerable effort to keep from shaking the captain to demand how he could have been so reckless and stupid and taken so long to act. Then Cale got to the part where Sorstra was beheaded, each word quieter and more clipped than the last. She had never learned the healer's name, not in all the times the woman had patched and sewn her up. For Dorian to lose her, Aelin swallowed hard. It got worse. So much worse as Cale explained what Dorian had done to get him out of the castle. He'd sacrificed himself, revealing his power to the king. She was shaking so badly that she tucked her hands into her pockets and clamped her lips together to lock up the words, but they danced in her skull anyway, around and around. You should have gotten Dorian and Sorstra out the day the king butchered those slaves. Did you learn nothing from Nehemiah's death? Did you somehow think you could win with your honor intact without sacrificing something? You shouldn't have left him. How could you let him face the king alone? How could you? Damn. She's kind of right, though. The grief in Cale's eyes kept her from speaking. She took a breath and he fell silent, mastering the anger and the disappointment and the shock. It took 3 blocks before she could think straight. Her wrath and tears would do no good. Her plans would change again, but not by much. Free Adian, retrieve the word key. She could still do it. She squared her shoulders. They were mere blocks away from her old apartment. And maybe it never worked. God damn! Oh my god, this chapter is long! At least she could have a place to lie low. If Arabin hadn't sold the property, he probably would have taunted her about it if he had, or perhaps left her to find it had a new owner. He loved surprises like that. So now you're working with the rebels, she said to Kale, or leading them from the look of it. There are a few of us in charge. My territory covers the slums and docks. There are others responsible for different sections of the city. We meet as often as we dare. Nesrin and some of the city guards have been able to get in contact with a few of my men, Ress and Brulo mostly. They've been looking for ways to get Dorian out, and Adian. But that dungeon is impenetrable, and they're watching the secret tunnels. We only went into their nest in the sewer tonight because we'd received word from Rez that there was some big meeting at the palace. Turns out they'd left more sentries behind than we'd anticipated. The castle was impossible to get into, unless she accepted Arabin's help. Another decision for tomorrow. What have you heard about Dorian since she fled? A flicker of shame shone in his bronze eyes. He had fled, though. He'd left Dorian in his father's hands. She clenched her fingers into fists to keep from slamming his head into the side of a brick building. How could he have served that monster? How could he have not seen it? Not have tried to kill the king anytime he got within striking range? She hoped that whatever Dorian's father had done to him, however he'd been punished, the prince knew he was not the only one grieving. And after she retrieved Dorian, she would let him know, when he was ready to listen, that she understood. And that it would be hard and long and painful, but he might come back from it, the loss. When he did, with that raw magic of his, free when hers was not, it could be critical in defeating the Valg. The king hasn't publicly punished Dorian, Kale said. Hasn't even locked him up. As far as we can tell, he's still attending events and will be at this execution birthday party of his. Adian. Oh, Adian. He knew who she was, what she had become, but Kale hadn't suggested whether her cousin might spit in her face the moment he laid eyes on her. She wouldn't care about it until Adian was safe, until he was free. So we've got Ress and Brulo inside and eyes on the castle walls, Kale went on. They say that Dorian seems to be behaving normally, but his demeanor is off. Colder, more distant. But that's to be expected after Sorsha was... Did they report him wearing a black ring? Kale shuddered. No, not a ring. There was something about his tone that made her look at him and wish she didn't have to hear his next words, Kale said. But one of the spies claimed that Dorian has a torque of black stone around his neck. A wordstone collar. For a moment, all Aelin could manage to do was stare at Kale. The surrounding buildings pressed on her, a giant pit opening beneath the cobblestone she walked upon, threatening. Kale didn't reply for an entire block. He had been silent throughout. He had not smiled. There was so little left of the guard she'd come to care for. As he at last met her gaze, his lips a thin line, he said, "So you're here alone?" I told Rowan it would be safer for him to remain in Wendlin. No, he said a bit sharply, facing the street ahead. I mean, you came back, but without an army, without allies. You came back empty-handed. Damn! Empty-handed. I don't know what you expected. You sent me to Wendlin. If you'd wanted me to bring back an army, you should have been a little more specific. I sent you there for your safety, so you could get away from the king. And as soon as I realized who you were, how could I not assume you'd run to your cousins, to Maeve? Have you not been listening to anything I said about what Maeve is like? The Ash Rivers are at her beck and call, and if Maeve does not send aid, they will not send aid. You didn't even try. He paused on a deserted corner. If your cousin Galen is a blockade runner, my cousin Galen is none of your concern. Do you even understand what I faced? Do you understand what it was like for us here? While you were off playing with magic, off gallivanting with your fairy prince, do you understand what happened to me? To Dorian? Do you understand what's happening every day in this city? because your antics in Wendlin might very well have been the cause of all of this. Oh my... What the fuck is wrong with him? What is wrong with him? Damn. Each word was like a stone to the head. Yes, just maybe, but my antics? If you hadn't been so dramatic about it, hadn't flaunted your defeat of Narak and practically shouted at the king that you were back, he would never have called us to that room. You do not get to blame me for that. For his actions. She clenched her fist as she looked at him, really looked at him, at the scar that would forever remind her of what he'd done, what she could not forgive. So what do I get to blame you for? He demanded as she started walking again, her step swift and precise. Anything? He couldn't mean that. He couldn't possibly mean it. Are you looking for things to blame me for? How about the fall of the kingdoms? The loss of magic? The second one, he said through his teeth. At least I know without a doubt it's not your doing. She paused again. What did you say? His shoulders tightened. That was all she needed to see to know he'd planned to keep it from her. Not from Selena, his former friend and lover, but from Aelin, Queen of Terrasen. A threat. Whatever this information about magic was, he hadn't planned to tell her. What exactly did you learn about magic, Kale? She said too quietly. He didn't reply. Tell me. He shook his head, a gap in the streetlights shadowing his face. No, not a chance. Not with you so unpredictable. Unpredictable. It was a mercy, she supposed, that magic was indeed stifled here, or else she might have turned the street to cinders around them just to show him how very predictable she was. You found a way to free it, didn't you? You know how. He didn't try to pretend otherwise. Having magic free would result only in chaos. It would make things worse. Perhaps make it easier for those demons to find and feed on magic wielders. You might very well regret those words when you hear the rest of what I have to say, she hissed, raging and roaring inside. She kept her voice low, enough that no one nearby might overhear as she continued. That collar Dorian is wearing. Let me tell you what it does, and let's see if you refuse to tell me then, if you dismiss what I've been doing these past months. With every word, his face further drained of color. The small, wicked part of her reveled in it. They target magic wielders, feeding off the power in their blood. They drain the life from those that aren't compatible to take an avowed demon, or, considering Rifthold's new favorite pastime, just execute them to drum up fear. They feed on it. Fear, misery, despair. It's like wine to them. The lesser Valg, they can see the mortal's body through those black rings. But their civilization, a whole damn civilization, she said, is split into hierarchies like our own, and their princes want to come to our world very, very badly. So the king uses collars. Black wordstone collars. She didn't think Kale was breathing. The collars are stronger, capable of helping the demons stay inside human bodies while they devour the person and power inside. Narak had one inside him. He begged me at the end to kill him. Nothing else could. I witnessed monsters you cannot begin to imagine to take on one of them and fail. Only flame, sorry, I was thinking, or beheading ends it. So you see, she finished, considering the gifts I have, you'll find that you want to tell me what you know. I might be the only person capable of freeing Dorian, or at least giving him the mercy of killing, if he's even in there. The last words tasted as horrible as they sounded. Kel shook his head, once, twice, and she might have felt bad for the panic, for the grief and despair on his face until he said, Did it even occur to you to send us a warning, to let any of us know about the king's collars? It was like a bucket of water had been dumped on her. She blinked. She could have warned them. Could have tried. Later. She'd think about that later. That doesn't matter, she said. Right now, we need to help Adian and Dorian. There is no we. He unfastened the eye of Elena from around his neck and chucked it at her. Oh, this is their breakup. This is their breakup. glimmered in the streetlights as it flew between them. She caught it with one hand, the metal warm against her skin. She didn't look at it before sliding it into her pocket. She went on. There hasn't been a we for a while. Selena. It's Aelin now, she snapped, as loudly as she dared. Selena Sardathian doesn't exist anymore. You're still the same assassin who walked away. You came back only when it was useful for you. It was an effort to keep from sending her fist into his nose. Instead, she pulled the silver amethyst ring out of her pocket and grabbed his hand, slamming it into his gloved palm. Why were you meeting with Arabin Hamel tonight? It doesn't matter. Tell me why. I wanted his help to kill the king. Aelin started. Are you insane? Did you tell him that? No, but he guessed it. I'd been trying to meet with him for a week now, and tonight he summoned me. You're a fool for going. She began walking away. Staying in one spot, however deserted, wasn't wise. Cale fell into step beside her. I didn't see any other assassins offering their services. She opened her mouth, then shut it. She curled her fingers, then straightened them one by one. The price won't be gold or favors. The price will be the last thing you see coming, likely the death or suffering of people you care about. You think I don't know that? So you want to have Arabin kill the king and what? Put Dorian on the throne? With a Valg demon inside him? I didn't know that until now, but it changes nothing. It changes everything. Even if you get that collar off, there's no guarantee the Valg hasn't taken root inside him. You might replace one monster with another. Why don't you say whatever it is you're getting at, Aelin? He hissed her name, barely loud enough for her to hear. Can you kill the king? When it comes down to it, could you kill your king? Dorian is my king. It was an effort not to flinch. Semantics. He killed Sorsja. He killed millions before her. Perhaps a challenge. Perhaps a question. Perhaps another question, sorry. His eyes flared. I need to go. I'm meeting Brulo in an hour. I'll come with you, she said, glancing toward the glass castle towering over the northeastern quarter of the city. Perhaps she'd learn a bit more about what the weapons master knew about Dorian, and how she might be able to put down her friend. Her blood turned icy, sluggish. No, you won't, Cale said. Her head snapped toward him. If you're there, I have to answer too many questions. I won't jeopardize Dorian to satisfy your curiosity. He kept walking straight, but she turned the corner with a slight shrug. Do what you want. Noticing she was heading away, he halted. And what are you going to be doing? Too much suspicion in his voice. She paused her steps and arched an eyebrow. Many things. Wicked things. If you give us away, Dorian will... She cut him off with a snort. You refuse to share your information, Captain. I don't think it's unreasonable for me to withhold mine. She made to walk down the street toward her old apartment. Not Captain, he said. She looked over her shoulder and studied him again. What happened to your sword? His eyes were hollow. I lost it. Ah. So it's just Lord Cale, then. Just Cale. For a heartbeat, she pitied him, and part of her wished she could say it more kindly, more compassionately. There's no getting Dorian out. There's no saving him. Like hell there isn't. You'd be better off considering other contenders to put on the throne. Do not finish that sentence. His eyes were wide, his breathing uneven. She'd said enough. She rolled her shoulders, leashing her temper. With my magic, I could help him. I could try to find a way to free him, but most likely kill him. God damn it, I can hear it making that noise. There. She wouldn't admit that out loud. Not until she could see him for herself. And what then? Cale asked. Will you hold all of Rifthold hostage the way you did Dornell? Burn anyone who doesn't agree with you? Or will you just incinerate our kingdom from spite? And what of others like you, who feel that they have a score to settle with Ardalan? He huffed a bitter laugh. Perhaps we're better off without magic. Perhaps magic doesn't exactly make things fair amongst us mere mortals. Fair? You think that any part of this is fair? Magic makes people dangerous. Magic has saved your life a few times now, if I recall correctly. Yes, he breathed. You and Dorian both, and I'm grateful. I am. But where are the checks against your kind? Iron? Not much of a deterrent, is it? Once magic is free, who's to stop the monsters from coming out again? Who's to stop you? A spear of ice shot through her heart. Monster. It had truly been horror and revulsion that she'd seen on his face that day she revealed her fae form in the other world. The day she'd cleaved the earth and called down fire to save him, to save Fleetfoot. Yes, there would always need to be checks against any sort of power, but monster. She wished he'd struck her instead. So Dorian is allowed to have magic. You can come to terms with his power, and yet my power is an abomination to you. Dorian has never killed anyone. Dorian didn't gut Archer Finn in the tunnels or torture and kill Grave and then chop him up into pieces. Dorian didn't go on a killing spree at Enderveer that left dozens dead. Oh my god. He cannot be serious right now. He cannot be serious right now. Are you for real? You know who would have never? You know who would have never? Sam. I had a reason for not trusting him at first. Yup. It was an effort to put up that old familiar wall of ice and steel. Everything behind it was crumbling and shaking. I've made my peace with that. She sucked on her teeth, trying so damn hard not to go for her weapons as she might once have done, as she still ached to do, and said, I'll be at my old apartment should you decide to take your head out of your ass. Good night. She didn't give him a chance to reply before she stalked down the street. Rowan would, though. I get that he doesn't like magic. Like, I get that he doesn't, like, necessarily trust magic wielders and, like, magic in general. Whatever. There are people that abuse it and that, you know, it's people that should not have it. But for him to say this shit about Aelin to her face, like, I feel like it's not okay. Like, Aelin has done nothing but prove to him that she is, like, there for the people. Like, she's done some bad shit, but she was also, like, a child, and she really didn't have a choice. So, this bitch has only ever just tried to survive. That's her only fault, I guess, is that this bitch was just trying to fucking survive. Yeah, it's disrespectful. It's horrible that he's saying this shit to her. Ugh, I thought he was better than that. God. Cale stood in the small bedroom of the ramshackle house that had been his squadron's primary headquarters for the past 3 weeks, staring at a desk littered with maps and plans and notes regarding the palace, the guards' rotations, and Dorian's habits. Brullo had nothing to offer during their meeting an hour earlier, just grim reassurance that Cale had done the right thing in leaving the king's service and walking away from everything he'd ever worked for. The older man still insisted on calling him captain despite Cale's protests. Brullo had been the one who'd found Cale and offered to be his eyes inside the castle, not 3 days after he'd fled, Aelin had said. She'd known exactly what word she wielded. A queen, raging and fiery, and and perhaps more than a little cruel, had found him tonight. He'd seen it from the moment he'd staggered out of the Valg's darkness to find her standing with a predator's stillness beside Nesrin. Despite the dirt and blood on her, Aelin's face was tan and flushed with color and different, older, as if the stillness and power she radiated had honed not just her soul, but also the very shape of her. And when he had seen her bare finger, Cale took out the ring he'd tucked into his pocket and glanced at the unlit hearth. It would be a matter of minutes to light a blaze and chuck the ring into it. He turned the ring over between his fingers. The silver was dull and marred with countless scratches. No, Selena Sardathian did not exist anymore. That woman, the woman he had loved, perhaps she drowned in the vast, ruthless sea between here and Wendland. Perhaps she died at the hands of the Valg princes, or maybe he'd been a fool all this time, A fool to look at the lives she'd taken and blood she'd so irreverently spilled and not be disgusted. There had been blood on her tonight. She'd killed many men before finding him. She hadn't even bothered to wash it off. Hadn't even seemed to notice she was wearing the blood of her enemies. A city. She'd encircled a city with her flames and made a Fae Queen tremble. No one should possess that sort of power. If she could make an entire city burn as retribution for a Fae Queen whipping her friend, what would she do to the empire that had enslaved and butchered her people? No, literally, that comment. I don't even think he loved Selena. He could never fully accept her past. I agree 100%. Because, no, yeah, just that. There's nothing else that needs to be said. Just that. I think he was also in love with the idea of her. More than, like, her. He would not tell her how to free magic. Not until he knew for certain that she wouldn't turn Rifthold into cinders on the wind. There was a knock on his door. 2 efficient beats. "You should be on your shift, Nesrin," he said by way of greeting. She slipped in, smooth as a cat. In the 3 years he'd known her, she'd always had that quiet, sleek way of moving. A year ago, a bit shattered and reckless from Lithian's betrayal, it had intrigued him enough that he'd spent the summer sharing her bed. Damn. My commander's drunk with his hand up the shirt of whatever new barmaid was in his lap. He won't notice my absence for a while yet. A faint sort of amusement shone in her dark eyes. The same sort of amusement that had been there last year whenever they would meet, at inns or in rooms above taverns or sometimes even up against the wall of an alley. He'd needed it, the distraction and release. After Lithian had left him for the charms of Roland Havillard, Nesrin had just been bored, apparently. She'd never sought him out, never asked when she would see him again, so their encounters had always been initiated by him. A few months later, he hadn't felt particularly bad when he'd gone to Endeavere and stopped seeing her. He'd never told Dorian, or Aelin, and when he'd run into Nesrin 3 weeks ago at one of the rebel gatherings, she hadn't seemed to be holding a grudge. "You look like a man who got punched in the balls," she said at last. He caught a glare in her direction, and because he did indeed feel that way, because maybe he was again feeling a bit shattered and reckless, he told her what had happened, who it had happened with. He trusted her. He trusted her, though. In the 3 weeks they'd been fighting and plotting and surviving together, he'd had no choice but to trust her. Ren had trusted her, yet Kale still hadn't told Ren who Selena truly was before he'd left. Perhaps he should have. If he'd known that she would come back like this, act this way, he supposed Ren should have learned who he was risking his life for. He supposed Nesrin deserved to know, too. Nesrin cocked her head, her hair shimmering like black silk. The King's Champion and Aelin Galathinius. Impressive. He didn't need to bother to ask her to keep it to herself. She knew exactly how precious that information was. He hadn't asked her to be his second in command for nothing. I should be flattered she held a knife to my throat. Cale glanced again at the ring. He should melt it. But money was scarce. He'd already used up much of what he'd snatched from the tomb, and he would need it now more than ever. Now that Dorian was gone. Selena. Aelin had lied about many things, but she wouldn't have lied about Dorian, and she might be the only person able to save him, but if she tried to kill him instead. He sank into the desk chair, staring blankly at the maps and plans he'd been cultivating. Everything was for Dorian, for his friend. For himself, he had nothing left to lose. He was nothing more than a nameless oathbreaker, a liar, a traitor. Nesrin took a step toward him. There was little concern in her face, but he'd never expected coddling from her. Never wanted it. Perhaps because she alone understood it, what it was like to face a father's disapproval, to follow the path that called. But while Nesrin's father had eventually accepted her choice, Cale's own father, he didn't want to think about his father right now. Not as Nesrin said, what she claimed about the prince, it changes nothing. It sounds like it changes everything, including the future of this kingdom. Just drop it. Nesrin crossed her thin arms. She was slender enough that most opponents underestimated her, to their own misfortune. Tonight, he'd seen her rip into one of the God damn it. and seen her rip into one of those Valg soldiers like she was filleting a fish. I think you're letting your personal history get in the way of considering every route. He opened his mouth to object. Nestrin lifted a groomed brow and waited. Maybe he'd been hot-headed just now. Maybe it had been a mistake to refuse to tell Aelin how to free magic. And if it cost him Dorian in the process... He swore softly, the rush of breath guttering the candle on the desk. The captain he'd once been would have refused to tell her. Aelin was an enemy of his kingdom. But that captain was no more. That captain had died alongside Sorscha in that tower room. You fought well tonight, he said, as if that were an answer. Nestrin clicked her tongue. I came back because I received a report that 3 of the city garrisons were called to the vaults not 30 minutes after we left. Her Majesty, Nestrin said dryly, killed a great number of the king's men, the owners and investors of the hall, and took it upon herself to wreck the place. They won't be open again anytime soon. Ugh. Gods above. Do they know it was the king's champion? No, but I thought I should warn you. I bet she had a reason for doing it. Maybe. Maybe not. You'll find that she tends to do what she wants, when she wants, and doesn't ask for permission first. Aelin probably had just been in a pissy mood and decided to unleash her temper on the pleasure hall. Is he fucking stupid? Nestrin said, you should have known better than to get tangled up with a woman like that. And here I was thinking I was gonna like her. And she's talking shit about my girl. And I suppose you would know everything about getting tangled up with people, given how many suitors are lined up outside your father's bakeries. Did he just call her a whore? A cheap shot, maybe, but they'd always been blunt with each other. She had never seemed bothered by it anyway. That faint gleam of amusement returned to her eyes as Nestrin put her hands in her pockets and turned away. This is why I never get too involved. Too messy. Why she didn't let anyone in, ever. He debated asking why, pushing about it, but limiting the questions about their past was part of their deal, and had been from the start. Honestly, he didn't know what he'd expected when the Queen returned. Not this. You do not get to pick and choose which parts of her to love, Dorian had once said to him. He'd been right. So painfully right. As he always is, because that man is amazing. Nestrin let herself out. At first light, Kale went to the nearest jeweler and pawned the ring for a handful of silver. I can't fucking stand him. Exhausted and miserable, Aelin trudged back to her old apartment above the unremarkable warehouse. Has she been back to her apartment since? Did she go back in? I don't think she's been back to this apartment. I think this is her. Let me get ready for this because, oh God, I already know I'm gonna cry. Exhausted and miserable, Aelin trudged back to her old apartment above the unremarkable warehouse. She didn't dare linger outside the large 2-level wooden building that she'd purchased when she'd at last paid off her debts to Arabin. Purchased for herself to get out of the keep. But it had only started to feel like a home when she'd... There he is. There fucking is. When she'd paid off Sam's debts as well, and he'd come to live here with her. A few weeks. That was all she'd been able to share with him. Then he was dead. I still cannot believe the short amount of time that they had together, and yet the impact that it had on me. The lock on the large rolling door was new, and inside the warehouse the towering stacks of crates full of ink remained in prime condition. No desk coated the stairs in the back. Either Arabin or another face from her past would be inside. Good. She was ready for another fight. When she opened the green door, a knife angled behind her. The apartment was dark, empty, but it smelled fresh. It was a matter of a few moments to check the apartment, the great room, the kitchen, and a few old apples, but no other signs of an occupant. Her bedroom, untouched, and the guest room. It was there that someone scent lingered. The bed was not quite perfectly made, and a note lay on the high dresser beside the door. Sorry. The captain said I could stay here for a while. Sorry for trying to kill you this winter. I was the one with the twin swords. Nothing personal. Ren. She swore. Ren had been staying here? And he still thought she was the king's champion. The night the rebels had kept Cale hostage in a warehouse, she had tried to kill him, and had been surprised when he'd held his ground. No, she remembered him. At least he was safe in the north. She knew herself well enough to admit that the relief was partially that of a coward, that she didn't have to face Ren and see how he might react to who she was, what she'd done with Marion's sacrifice. Given Cale's own reaction, not well seemed like a fair guess. She walked back into the darkened great room, lighting candles as she went. The large dining table occupying one half of the space was still set with her elegant plates. The couch and 2 red velvet armchairs before the ornate mantel were a bit rumpled, but clean. For a few moments she just stared at the mantel. A beautiful clock had once sat there, until the day she'd learned Sam had been tortured and killed by Rorik Farron. That the torture had gone on for hours, while she'd sat on her ass in this apartment, packing trunks that were now nowhere to be seen. And when Arabin had come to deliver the news, she'd taken that beautiful clock and hurled it across the room, where it had shattered against the wall. I'm waiting for it to pass, I'm sorry. She hadn't been back here since then, though someone had cleaned up the glass, either Ren or Arabin. A look at one of the many bookshelves gave her the answer. Every book she'd packed for that one-way trip to the southern continent, for that new life with Sam, had been put back in place, exactly where she'd once kept them. And there was only one person who would know those details, who would use the unpacked trunks as a taunt and a gift and a quiet reminder of what leaving him would cost her. Which meant Arabin had no doubt known she would return here at some point. She padded into her bedroom. She didn't dare check whether Sam's clothes had been unpacked into the drawers or thrown out. A bath. That's what she needed. A long, hot bath. She hardly noticed the room that had once been her sanctuary. She lit the candles in the white-tiled bathroom, casting the chamber in flickering gold. After turning the brass knobs on the oversized porcelain bathtub to start the water flowing, she unstrapped each of her weapons. She peeled off her filthy, bloody clothes layer by layer until she stood in her own scarred skin and gazed at her tattooed back in the mirror above the sink. A month ago, Rowan had covered her scars from Endivere with a stunning, scrolling tattoo written in the old language of the Fae, the stories of her loved ones, and how they died. She would not have Rowan ink another name on her flesh. She climbed into the tub, moaning at the delicious heat, and thought of the empty place on the mantel where the clock should have been, the place that had never quite been filled again since that day she'd shattered the clock. Maybe she'd also stopped in that moment. Stopped living and started just surviving, raging. And maybe it had taken until this spring, when she had been sprawled on the ground while 3 Valk princes fed on her, when she had at last burned through that pain and darkness for the clock to start again. No, she would not add another name of her beloved dead to her flesh. She yanked the washcloth from beside the tub and scrubbed at her face, bits of mud and blood clouding the water. Unpredictable. The arrogance, the sheer single-minded selfishness. Cale had run. He'd run, and Dorian had been left to be enslaved by the caller. Dorian. she'd come back, but too late. Too late. She dunked the washcloth again and covered her face with it, hoping it would somehow ease the stinging in her eyes. Maybe she'd sent too strong a message from Wendelin by destroying Narog. Maybe it was her fault that Adian had been captured, Sorsha killed, and Dorian enslaved. Monster. And yet, for her friends, for her family, she would gladly be a monster. For Rowan, for Dorian, for Nehemiah, she would debase and degrade and ruin herself. She knew they would have done the same for her. She slung the washcloth into the water and sat up. Monster or no, never in 10,000 years would she have let Dorian face his father alone, even if Dorian had told her to go. A month ago, she and Rowan had chosen to face the Val Princes together, to die together, if need be, rather than do so alone. You remind me of what the world ought to be, what the world can be, she'd once said to Kale. Her face burned. A girl had said those things. A girl so desperate to survive, to make it through each day that she hadn't questioned why he served the true monster of their world. Aelin slipped back under the water, scrubbing at her hair, her face, her bloody body. She could forgive the girl who had needed a captain of the guard to offer stability after a year in hell. Forgive the girl who had needed a captain to be her champion. But she was her own champion now. Period. Period. Period! And she would not add another name of her beloved dead to her flesh. So when she awoke that next morning, Aelin wrote a letter to Erebin, accepting his offer. One Valg demon, owed to the King of the Assassins, in exchange for his assistance in the rescue and safe return of Adi and Ash River, the Wolf of the North. Hold on. Hold on. Yep, I did see that right. Okay. The next couple of chapters are gonna be hard. Oh my god. My back is killing me. Oh god. God damn it. Ada's alone? Okay. I don't know what else to say other than it's gonna be a long book. That's for fucking sure. It's gonna be a long book. No, I don't. My throat is killing me. I might have to not do a live tomorrow because my throat is killing. Like, it hurts a lot. What, Nico? King Nagash was spoiled for me. No! Like the ending, like the main, I don't even know how to, like, was it like a big thing? Like a big thing? Or no? Oh, Nico, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Oh, that eats me up. That's also why I really have tried to keep my, like, For You page off of Book Talk. I've been, like, liking and interacting with, like, a lot of videos that are just, like, funny instead of, like, book related, because I don't want to get a spoiler. I'm so sorry. Not the biggest, but big. Yeah, who did it? Who did it? I'll go report them. I'll light it up in their comments. I'm sorry. It sucks. That does suck. I wish I had brought another avocado because I'm still hungry. Have y'all ever eaten limon y sal? Salt and lime, sorry. Salt and lime. Like, just like sprinkling some salt on a lime and like eating it like that. I had the end of what the hell is that? HOSAB? What did you just call me? Where's your tequila? Girl, I need it. I'm gonna go to the fucking daiquiri bar or something like that. Oh. Right. Crescent City. House of Sky and Breath. Oh. Okay. Is that maybe why your throat hurts? No. My throat hurts because after a week of vacation, I like came back to my class and I have to use my voice a lot with my kids. And I have to raise my voice so they can hear me a lot with them. I work with like 2-year-olds, so I'm always yelling. Not yelling, like I'm not like yelling at them, but I do have to raise my voice a little with them a lot throughout the day, so I'm just using my voice a lot, and then it's just, I think I'm getting sick, so I don't have COVID, but I do have something. I don't know what it is. I haven't done this since I was a little girl. Oh my God. I know COVID's going around, but we have something at our school because one of my kids went home with a fever on Monday. She was sick and she was coughing. She was coughing in my face. So I caught something. El chilito. Some tajin. Sprinkle some tajin on there. Oh, mango con chamoy sounds really good right now. Cause it's hot as balls here, y'all. I remember I knew Sam was going to die, but didn't know when. Imagine my surprise in the first book. What? I kind of wish I would have known that Sam was gonna die. Honest to God. Now that I'm done with it, I wish I would have known that Sam was gonna die. Because y'all know my hope was crushed. Y'all know the high hopes, the high expectations that I had for him and Selena. And I really thought they were endgame. I really did. I never learned my fucking lesson. Ever. I'm a hopeless romantic. Come on, y'all. When they're in love, I want them to stay in love. I cried so hard on Assassin's Blade. It's just so fucking sad. And SJM does the absolute most with letting you know that he did suffer. He did not have a moment of peace, a moment of solitude in his final moments. That last night for him was the longest and worst and just last night of his life. And he had no peace. There was no peace in his death. It was just pain. Are you going to read Crescent City after Throne of Glass? Yes, we decided that yesterday that I was gonna read Crescent City. I'm not gonna read like the whole book, but I am gonna read like important chapters that y'all want me to read. But I figured I might as well just get this SJM series out of the way since I've read the only lives I've ever done were for SJM or From Blood and Ash. But we know how that turned out. We know how my interest in that series turned out. It was so disappointing. There was peace knowing Selena wasn't there too, I guess. If you can even call that peace. Chapters 4 through 7, and then the last 200 pages. This whole series drained my soul. You're telling me? You're telling me? Oh my God. I am really glad that I decided to take a step back before I continued reading it though, because oh my God, I was drained. Emotionally, I was drained. I was done. I was so done. Especially after Air of Fire, I was done. Crescent City 1 and 2 will never be read again. Y'all want me to read this book? Oh, this is so good. I'll be going back to reread them for research purposes. So for the smut, you're going back to read it for the smut, is what you just told me. Crescent City 2 stressed me out. I like to be stressed by books. I love to be stressed by books. I realized after the Assassin's Blade, I realized I don't like to be hurt by books. I thought I did. I don't. I like to be stressed out by books. Crescent City 2 gave me gray hair. Y'all know what I want to reread? What series I will reread? And I will forever be thankful for Ale sending me that series is, oh my God, Kingdom of the Wicked. Jesus Christ, that series. Y'all, I can never say enough good things about that series. Life. It gave me life. My order of SJM series is Throne of Glass, Crescent City, then A Court of Thorns and Roses. So I read the worst series that I could have started with as an introduction to SJM is the series I read first. Oh, y'all, that reminds me. Okay, so this app emailed me, and usually I ignore a lot of the like collabs that I get, or like collab offers that I get, unless I really resonate with the brand. And I have a lot of apps that DM me asking me to like promote their apps. This isn't even really an app. It's like a website that I can link to my website, to my link tree, and it gives you a list of everything that I have ever recommended on my TikTok. So like I was thinking I could put all like my book recommendations for you guys there, all like the books that I really like. I haven't like opened my account with them yet, but I told them that I would be interested in it. So keep your eye out for that, because I did want to do that for y'all, because I feel like I'm always recommending shit and then like I never talk about it again. So at least there you would have like a list of like, and I could even put like my TBR on there so that you can see what I am wanting to read. What's it called? I don't remember what it's called. Benable, something like that. It's like it's the whole purpose of the app is to like itemize lists for your followers, like recommendations for them. So, but it sounds fun. Yeah, there needs to be more Wrath fan art. There really does. Also, another thing that I'm getting, that someone DM'd me about is, y'all know those what are they called? Embossers? The embossers that people will get, and they'll get their book. Oh my God. And they'll like on like the first page, like right here, they'll like not stamp it, but like imprint something on it. I'm getting one of those. They're sending it to me for free. I have to make like a video about it, an unboxing video for it. But that's fine, because I do unboxing videos for you all the time. But I'm getting one. I'm so excited. It has a little bee. It has a little bee in the middle, and it says from the library of Bianca Hasso, and it has the bee in the middle. I'm so excited for it. I just sent them my address yesterday, so I'm really excited to get that in the mail. I'm excited. They're so cute. They're so cute. So cute. So cute. Okay. What else? What else did I need to talk to y'all about? I think that's it. Yeah. I lost my train of thought. Game of Thrones got me crazy crying since season 1. Game of Thrones it made me cry a lot. Like, I cried a lot, but I didn't feel emotionally drained from it until the last season. The last season put me through the fucking ringer, because I'm a Targaryen girl, so you know how that played out for me. But I'm also, like, I resonated so deeply with, I'm not even going to list names in case someone hasn't seen it, but, like, every single person on her team, basically, every single person on her side, I resonated so deeply with, especially one man in particular. Like, literally, I loved him so much. So it was just, yeah. I wasn't a Stark person, so I didn't really care about the end of season 1. I've never been a Stark girl, except Rob. Rob Stark, I would risk it all for. I would risk it all for Rob. God damn, I love that man. Fuck the red wedding, is all I have to say. Yeah, the whole reason I started watching Game of Thrones was for Daenerys. Yeah, that's exactly how I felt about Sansa too. She got on my fucking nerves. Oh, she got on my goddamn fucking nerves. But I had to give the bitch credit where credit was due, because she did that shit. She turned that shit around for her. Good for her. I remember exactly where I was when I watched the Red Wedding. I was literally watching it on my phone. And this was the first episode that my brother had watched with me, because I had been trying to get my brother into Game of Thrones for the longest, and he just refused because he thought it was too nerdy and he thought the world was too complicated and he wasn't going to get it. He was right. He didn't get the world at all. He only kept watching it for Daenerys. But I remember I was like, okay, watch this episode with me, and then if you don't like it, like, you won't have to keep watching it. The first fucking episode he watched was the Red Wedding. And I had my phone, and I wasn't expecting shit. So we were literally watching it on the couch, and I'm watching it on my phone. The Red Wedding happens. I'm literally screaming, crying, throwing my phone, and he's looking at me like, what the fuck is going on with you? What the fuck is going on with you? He had no idea what was going on. And that was the first episode he'd ever watched. I like Arya too. I think she's a girl boss. I don't understand why they tried to push that shit with her and Gendry. Did not make sense. Thought that bitch was a lesbian. I don't think she should have been the one to kill the Night King at all. Don't think she should have been the one to do that at all. Also, I hated what they did with Jon's character, because I had no beef with him. I had no qualms with Jon's character until season 8. Season 7 and 8. I thought she was gay. I really thought she was gay. But I guess not. We can't all be gay. Anyway, enough ranting about that. Beautiful show turned to shit. I'm gonna go ahead and go, because I haven't eaten dinner and I want to go eat dinner. So, I love y'all. Well, I don't think I'm gonna do a live tomorrow. I'm gonna go ahead and say I'm not gonna do a live tomorrow. I'm gonna go on vocal rest. Anyway, I'm gonna take a little break tomorrow, but I will be back on Thursday, and so I will see y'all on Thursday, and we'll see if I either lose my voice more or if I am able to get it back, because it's like leaving me right now. So yeah, I'll see y'all Thursday, hopefully. I love y'all. Thanks for coming. Bye.